Oh baby, do you know what that means when you hear the choir? Because you should by now. It's time for another weekly preview. That's right, you already know where you are, baby. It is week 3. It is time for us to dive in to week 3. Whether you're 1-1, 2-0, or 0-2, we got you covered for week 3 over here at Fantasy Vulture. I, of course, am your host, Mike Kyle. Be sure to follow me on all social media platforms at FSVulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience and have continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 7 seasons. Let's make it 8 in 2021. But let's just dive right in, shall we? I don't got a whole lot to talk about. Do the usual things though. Hit the like button, subscribe down below if you are excited for week 3, and let's get you guys a W so you can continue down your path to fantasy football glory. You guys know how we do this by now. It's time for another beautiful presentation of all your start sits, injury designations, and roster lineup decision makings. So let's just go right into it, shall we? We're going to start off with the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Tennessee Titans over there in Tennessee, actually. I could say in Indy. So for the Colts side of things, is Carson Wentz going to play? Is he not? That remains to be seen. He is the definition of a game time decision with 2 sprained ankles, not just one. He sprained them both last week. So what are we doing in terms of Colts players? Well, Jonathan Taylor, always up and active in our lineup. And I'm in on Michael Pittman this week, regardless of the quarterback situation. We know how putrid Tennessee's secondary has been this year. They give up big play after big play. And as a result, Michael Pittman should be in your lineup regardless of quarterback play. I feel pretty confident with that, where just the defense is too bad to make up for the potential drop in quarterback play if Wentz is not on the field. Jacob Eason would likely be the starter for the Colts if Wentz is a no-go. Zach Pascal is also named, just kind of keep at the top of mind, maybe as a flex option if you're needy at that spot. Again, just kind of exploiting that Titans secondary. Over on Tennessee side, you guys know how this goes every single week. Tannehill, Derrick Henry, Julio, and A.J. Brown, all up in your lineup. They should never leave your lineup, let's be honest here. Our next game, that is the wrong screen. My bad, apologies for that. Let's go flip over to this. There we go. Our next game, let's talk about Atlanta taking on the New York Giants at MetLife. Injuries for the Falcons. Russell Gage is out with a sprained ankle. He only has 1 ankle sprain, not just 2, unlike, Carson Wentz. Starts for your Falcons. I'm still in on Mike Davis, though I increasingly am more hesitant to play him the more I watch this Falcons team. So that being said, start him if you have to. By all means, you'll be okay. But if you have other options, maybe look elsewhere first. Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, never leave your lineup. And Matt Ryan, I'm just not sure what to make of this Falcons offense right now. This team is an absolute disaster. And as a result, you can play the top receiving options, but just not the quarterback because the points may not come in big chunks for Matt Ryan. On the other side for the Giants, Kenny Golladay is questionable with a knee injury. I believe he was limited in practice on Friday, so we'll see what his status is going to be for this game. Questionable for sure, though. But Daniel Jones, Saquon, Kenny G if he's active, and Sterling Shepard. These are all guys that I want to start this week. We just talked about the mess that is the Falcons, and their defense is just like their offense. And this whole team, Atlanta's whole team, is just atrocious. So this is going to be a team that we try and pick on all season long if you have the players facing Atlanta. So this may be like the only time this year where I actually recommend streaming Daniel Jones, but that is just because of how bad this Falcons team is going to be. Saquon Barkley was not on the injury report whatsoever to cap out the week, so we love that for him. He should be a full go. And just the monster start to the year that Sterling Shepard has had. A game with 7 receptions, a game with 9 double-digit targets, I believe, in both games, if I'm not mistaken. Got in the end zone once already. Sterling Shepard, if he just check to see if he's on your waiver wire right now, because he could be an incredible wide receiver add for you, who he's currently as the number 1 wide receiver for the Giants. Our next game, let's go over to the Chargers taking on the Chiefs. And this is just one of those games where we say, start everybody. Herbert, Eckler, Allen, Williams, Cook, all in your starting lineup for Los Angeles. And over there on the Kansas City side of the ball, Mahomes, Clyde, Tyreek, Travis Kelce, also full go in your lineups. I want to take a moment though, and I want to talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, a player who I've been extremely high on going into the year. I'm gonna say, guys, I'm concerned. I am so fucking rattled right now about Clyde because I have him everywhere. I have him in as many leagues that I was able to get my hands on him in, and I'm rattled. I'm very concerned right now. I mean, you just watch the way that this Chiefs offense is moving, and even there was a play last week versus Baltimore, and this was in the fourth quarter, as Kansas City is driving down the field late in the game. I think it was when there was like 4 minutes left on the clock, and Kansas City was down before Clyde actually fumbled the ball. There was a play where Clyde was the first option off of a screenplay design, and Mahomes looked at him and then looked him off, and I was like, oh no, we have issues. I believe Clyde has like 2 receptions on the year. Don't quote me on that, but let me check just to make sure. But they just aren't fully utilizing him in ways that he is capable of. Yep, so 3 targets, 3 receptions on the year. Was not targeted at all last week versus Baltimore. Here's the good news though with Clyde, and this is what this is where my lack of concern comes from. 72% of snaps, 65% of snaps. Like, he's on the field. He's on the field. They just aren't running the ball. I mean, 14 and 13 attempts is fine, but he's not breaking off any big plays. He's just getting chunk yardage and like micro doses, and they just aren't compiling up into anything. Obviously, the fumble last week to cap off the game was an absolute nightmare disaster for an already putrid performance from Clyde. But just know I have concerns. I am considering shopping him everywhere, if that gives you any idea of where I'm at right now. Up next, let's talk about the Bengals taking on the Steelers. We got a pair of wide receiver injuries for this game. T. Higgins, doubtful with a shoulder injury for Cincinnati, and Deontay Johnson has already been ruled out with a knee injury for Pittsburgh. That being said, over for Cincinnati, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, all in your starting lineup. Just the production is going to be there. I'm not confident in Joe Burrow this week. We just know with that Pittsburgh Steelers defense, we know how nightmarish it can be. Even though they're battling through some injuries themselves, T.J. Watt is inactive for this game with that groin injury, and Alex Highsmith is out for Pittsburgh as well on the defensive side of the ball. I like the uptick in Boyd's production this week, minus T. Higgins, and then you're just going to see the usual production, I think, from Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase. Over for Pittsburgh, Najee doesn't leave your lineup. Chase Claypool, I like this week as well. And Juju's the interesting one for me. Like, yes, Deontay is out, so you're looking at very similar logic here. Honestly, between these two, like, these offenses are just extremely similar. And so it's funny that you actually have these, like, looking side by side where it's like Mixon and Harris and Chase and Claypool and Boyd and Juju, because just the way that these offenses are designed very much mirror each other, and the way that their offensive skill weapons are utilized. Out of all these wide receivers, I love Juju the least. I have a few concerns. We'll see what happens. If you have a better option than Juju, I would probably look to go that better option route. But Juju, if you got to start him, you got to do sometimes, right? The injuries are starting to pile up in week 3. Now let's go over to Chicago, taking on Cleveland in Cleveland. And we got some more injuries here as well. Andy Dalton is not playing in this game with that knee injury. Darnell Mooney is also questionable with a groin injury as well. Whoops. We are overlapping here just a little bit. Let's see if I can fix this. What if we did this? We're going to do some live edits here. There we go. Wait. No? Can we not? All right, we'll do that. That's fine. That'll work. So for this game, Justin Fields is starting. Okay. We love to see this as somebody who's a big fan of Justin Fields. I'm only going to start, though, David Montgomery and Allen Robinson. Darnell Mooney just battling the injury. Also, you don't know what the target distribution is going to be from Fields himself. You know Allen Robinson is going to be the focal point of this offense. That's not going to change. And Montgomery is obviously going to get all of the work on the ground there as well. I don't want to start Mooney, and I don't want to start Justin Fields. Again, this is one of those situations where I say I got to see it first. I want to see the targets are distributed between Mooney, A-Rob, and anybody else in that offense. I want to see what Fields looks like before I'm throwing them into my starting lineup. I'm going to go for the surefire plays here with Montgomery and Allen Robinson, though, automatically. On the other side for Cleveland, Jarvis Landry placed on IR with an MCL sprain. He is out for this game, and your starts for the Browns are going to be Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and Odell. Another thing to note here, I don't have them listed, and just for the record, if they are not listed as starts or sits, I'm just very indifferent on them. I don't have like a polarizing take or like a take that leans one way or the other when I talk about that player. But the Browns tight ends are being featured more and more this season. I think they're like top 5 in tight end usage, if my memory serves correctly. So Austin Hooper and David Njoku, but it's just another one of those situations where you have 2 tight ends, and that makes either one of them, you just can't rely on. You can't rely on either as a result. So that is just something to keep in mind, though. Maybe if there's a week in the future where you're just riddled with injury for your tight end, or it's a bye week and you need somebody to pick up, look at the Browns tight end, just something to keep in the back of your head. Let's go over to Detroit now, where the Ravens are taking on the Lions. No injuries report for either side. For Baltimore, I mean, we just saw what Green Bay did to Detroit. Baltimore could very well do the exact same thing. Lamar, Tyson, Latavius, Marquise, Mark Andrews in your lineup. Start them all. This is just a game. Start everybody for Baltimore. On the other side for Detroit, Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift, TJ Hawkinson. That's it. That's it. We're not trusting Jared Goff in this matchup. We're not going to trust any of the wide receivers either. Just stick to what we know, because we know that this offense revolves around the running backs and TJ Hawkinson. And if you're like me, who has DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson, you're kind of sitting pretty here, even though this is a tough matchup versus a very good Baltimore Ravens defense. Now let's go over to the New Orleans Saints taking on the New England Patriots. No injuries report for either side, but for the Saints, I'm only willing to play Alvin Kamara here in this matchup. We know what Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots defense can do to quarterbacks, and this just feels like a game where Jameis is going to throw 4 picks. And looking at how weird this offense was and how they got shut down last week versus Carolina, I'm trying to just figure out what to make of this offense, because we had 1 week of this offense being great, 1 week of this offense being downright abysmal, and so what is the middle ground here? I'm unsure what that middle ground is, so I'm going to try and back away, pump the brakes on the New Orleans Saints outside of Alvin Kamara. For the New England Patriots, it's kind of the same story. I'm still trying to figure out what to make of this Patriots offense. I know 2 things, though. I know Damian Harris is heavily involved, and I know Nelson Aguilar is heavily involved. And that is what I'm going to go with. Again, I have no interest in playing the tight ends. I don't have interest in playing Jacoby Myers or Mac Jones. Just play with what we know so far in Week 3. Now let's go over to the Arizona Cardinals taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Injuries. This is a big one. DeAndre Hopkins hopped up on the injury report late this week. Did not practice Friday with a rib injury. And if they don't practice Friday, more often than not, you're not going to play. So this is what we're going to do. Kyler in your lineup. Chase Edmonds in your lineup. I should actually make a note here. James Conner probably in your lineup too. Just as like a deep flex play if you need to. Just because anybody can run on the Jags this year, and by anybody, I mean literally anybody can run on the Jags. Rondale Moore, I like him as a flex option here too. But Christian Kirk is the name I want to bring up. If DeAndre Hopkins does not play, Christian Kirk in your lineup. If Hopkins does play, Christian Kirk out of your lineup, unless you're in a deep league and you just need to take a dart throw. I mean, there aren't, when you look at how you decide what dart throws to throw, I look at opposing defense and then offense. And if you're in a situation like this, where you are facing a terrible Jags defense and you're in one hell of an offense in Arizona, good things can happen there. So I think that's something to just keep in the back of your head. If you need a dart throw, Christian Kirk should be on your radar. For Jacksonville, no injuries to report. James Robinson, I'm going to give it 1 more week. He's last week what we saw the shift was he handled the majority of the snaps and the carries for Jacksonville. It was the opposite in week 1 where you saw Carlos Hyde on the field a lot. So I think the pendulum has swung back in the favor of James Robinson. We just got to get him going. He's actually averaging over 4 yards a carry. So it's not like he's been bad. I mean, this team has just been atrocious on the offensive side of the ball so far this year. DJ Chark, I'm in on in this matchup, as well as Marvin Jones. We've just seen what Trevor Lawrence has been able to do by getting in the end zone multiple times, as well as just kind of chucking it. I mean, they are just letting Trevor Lawrence throw wildly in this Jags offense right now, and that's going to lead to fantasy points. I mean, we're looking at maybe a Blake Bortles 2015 situation where Blake Bortles finished as a top 8 fantasy quarterback, even though the Jacksonville Jaguars were atrocious. Now, let's go to Washington taking on Buffalo. No injuries report for either side for Washington. We're going to start with the usual: Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas in your lineup. And then also for the usual for the Bills, we're going to roll with Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and I don't have interest in playing anybody else against a very, very good Washington defense. We're not going to do the running back situation again. Zach Moss was only viable last week because he got in the end zone twice on goal line carries, and Devin Singletary, just is still not a good NFL running back. Now, the Jets taking on the Broncos, and this is my pick'em of the week. I'm taking Denver over the Jets in my suicide pools. Out injuries for the Jets: Tevin Coleman out with COVID. Jamison Crowder also out, or he's doubtful, probably out due to COVID protocols as well. I'm starting Corey Davis, and I'm sitting everybody else for the Jets. Just watching what this team is on offense. I know we talked about this a bit last week, but even after week 2, it confirmed it even more. The only Jet that you want to start at this current moment of time is Corey Davis, and that is absolutely it. For Denver, did you guys just see what happened to the Jets last week versus New England? Did you see what happened in week 1 versus Carolina? Follow the same trend. This is going to be a common thing throughout the year, very similar to Atlanta. Start everybody against the Jets. I mean, I'm starting Teddy, Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Noah Fant. Start them all. I mean, you're looking at Denver. They're at home. They're favored by 10.5. This game could get ugly quick for the Jets. Now let's go to the Dolphins taking on the Raiders. And this was actually just breaking just before I started recording. Tua ruled out, but it gets even worse because Tua was placed on IR with those broken ribs, and he is not to be expected back until about week 6. So what do we do with this Dolphins offense, you ask? I know what we're going to do. We are only going to start Myles Gaskin for now. The Raiders have been playing much better than I think we all expected them to be playing at this point in the season. But with Jacoby Brissett quarterbacking the Dolphins, I have no idea what this distribution is going to be. Oh, and we're also injecting Will Fuller into this offense as well after he missed the first 2 games. One for personal reasons, one due to suspensions from last season. So what's the target distribution for Devontae Parker, Will Fuller, Mike Gesicki, Jalen Waddle with the backup quarterback? I have no idea, and I don't want to find out by rolling the dice and putting them in my starting lineup. For the Raiders, Josh Jacobs is doubtful with that ankle and toe injury. Again, sucks to have a running back injured so early on top of all the other injuries that we've already suffered at the position. But that is why we go running back early and often, because hopefully you have your corners covered. So Kenyon Drake, Darren Waller, only guys who I'm willing to start here for the Raiders. Derek Carr, if you honestly, if you have to, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. I get it, because Carr's been excellent for you this season, but he's been excellent even though his receiving core really hasn't been. We saw Ruggs have a big game last week. Edwards had a good week 1, and just without having that consistency between these receiving options for the Raiders, I still have zero interest in starting either one of them. Let's go to another great matchup where we say just start everybody, and that is Seattle and Minnesota. In Minnesota, Dalvin Cook is questionable with an ankle injury. And just before I started recording, the team promoted Amir Abdullah from the practice squad up to the 53-man roster. Gonna be honest, that more so indicates to me that Dalvin might not play, and that's why you see Alexander Madison's name on this list with the asterisks, because if Dalvin does not play, we are firing up Alexander Madison. Per usual, we're firing up Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne as the team's number 3 wide receiver, is really taking over that tight end style role for Minnesota. And honestly, I mean, we're just gonna do it. We are just going to do it. Let's throw in Kirk Cousins on this list as well. I just realized I said start everybody and didn't have Kirk's name on that list. I mean, let's just do it. Like, this game could just go into an absolute shootout mode for sure. For Seattle, Russell Wilson, Chris Carson, Metcalf, and Lockett always in your starting lineup regardless. Let's go over to the I was gonna say Sunday night game. The fact that this isn't a Sunday night game kind of blows my mind, to be honest. So for the Bucs taking on the Rams in Los Angeles, and this to me, I think for a lot of people as well, is the game of the week. There's going to be so many fantasy points scored from this game, and if there is a game this year that ends with a final score of 50-45, it might be this one. For Tampa Bay, we got Antonio Brown out this week due to COVID, did not travel with the team to LA, but that's fine because we're still going to start Tom Brady, Leonard Fournette, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Rob Gronkowski. You may notice that there's a sit there though. Like, there is just one itty bitty sit from this team, and that's Ronald Jones. Because if you look at the way that this has gone for him to start the year, fumbled in week 1, did not see the field after the fumble, which is like a very typical Bruce Arians thing, especially if you followed Ronald Jones' career. This is a common trend. But then last week in week 2, Leonard Fournette out-snapped and out-carried Ronald Jones. Leonard Fournette is the starting running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's just the way that it goes. So if you are a Rojo owner, I would sell immediately. I don't know what you could get. Maybe you hope that he falls into the end zone this week and then you try and trade him. But just know, I personally feel like the clock is ticking on Ronald Jones and his time in Tampa Bay. For the other side, for Los Angeles, Darrell Henderson is questionable with a rib injury as well. If he is inactive, Sony Michel should be up and in your lineup. But if he isn't, I think we're gonna get more of a split between Henderson and Michel. I know that Sean McVay was saying that like he's trying to figure out like just how easy he wanted to take Henderson in practice on Friday, and that'll probably set them up for another game time decision for Henderson. Remember, this is a 4:25 kickoff, so hopefully if you are waiting and seeing what to do with Henderson, you have a contingency plan. Here's a piece of advice. Put Henderson in your flex. That way, worst case scenario, you can substitute him with either another running back or a wide receiver. Starts though for this game for Los Angeles: Stafford, Kupp, Woods, Higbee, all up in your lineup. Sony Michel entirely dependent on the game status of Darrell Henderson. Let's go over to Sunday night, where we have just a crazy running back situation here for San Francisco. Green Bay taking on the 49ers. Let's start off with San Fran actually for this. Elijah Mitchell, doubtful for this game with a knee injury. JaMychal Hasty, placed on IR, which means Trey Sermon, who had 1 carry last week and was concussed, made it through concussion protocol and is starting this week after being inactive for week 1. What a story. What a story for the rookie running back out of Ohio State. Welcome to the NFL. What a way to start your career. So starts for San Fran. We're going to go with Trey Sermon, like just trusting what Kyle Shanahan does with running backs and his ability to just pick and choose anybody off the street and have him rush for 4.7 yards a carry, get in the end zone once or twice too. It's just a tale as old as time. So Trey Sermon in my lineup, Deebo Samuel and George Kittle as well. I'm still not confident in Brandon Ayuk. We saw the snaps increase last week, and hey, you got a target, so, progress. But it's still not enough for me to be confident to throw Ayuk in at this current moment of time. If it trends in the right direction, which it looks like it's going to this week, after this week will be the time that we're likely going to be putting Ayuk back into the good graces of our starting him week in and week out. And I'm still not playing Jimmy G. You guys know how I feel about Jimmy G by now. For Green Bay, the usual: Aaron, Devontae, Robert. Put them in your lineup. You'll be good. This is going to be a fun game on Sunday night. I'm still not playing A.J. Dillon. I haven't seen enough from him where I'm like, oh yeah, you can confidently start A.J. Dillon every single week. Because again, remember, a lot of the ways that I make my decisions based on my lineup, the way that I base a lot of my lineup making decisions is because of my confidence. If I'm like, oh, this does not feel good, I'm going to try and avoid that at all costs, and I still feel that way with A.J. Dillon through 2 weeks of this NFL season. And lastly, let's wrap this up with Monday night, the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Dallas Cowboys. And shit, I mean, we got another case of start 80% of everybody. Jalen in your lineup, Miles Sanders, Devonta Smith, and Jalen Reagor, all for the Eagles. We're still in this weird tight end situation between Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, so I don't want to play either of them. We're in a very similar situation with the tight ends for Dallas, so they are out as well. But then for Dallas, Dak, Zeke. We'll talk about Tony Pollard in a second. Amari Cooper should be up and active, ready to go. CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup as well. This game should be a whole lot of fun on Monday night, and I feel like a lot of matchups are going to come down to the players that you have playing in this game. But let's talk about Tony Pollard here. I just want to pull this up just to make sure that I'm not telling tales out of school and that my facts are correct. But Tony Pollard had an incredible game last week versus the Chargers. 13 carries, 109 yards, got in the end zone, 3 receptions for 31 yards. Here's the thing, though, about Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard played 34% of snaps in that game. 2 weeks ago in week 1, he played 24% of snaps. Guys, this is still Zeke Elliott's backfield. So while I have Tony Pollard as a start, the reality of the situation is that Tony Pollard is actually a sit. Don't let the one game and the big numbers fool you until you start to see everything materialize, right? Because at this point now, it's very similar to any other team. I want to know what it's very similar to? It's very similar to the New Orleans Saints as a whole, right? We just talked about how they looked incredible in week 1 and they looked like absolute booty in week 2 versus Carolina. You are looking at something very similar here with Tony Pollard, who played 24% of snaps, did absolutely nothing in week 1, and then in week 2 has a big game. And now it's up to you to decide, what do you believe about Tony Pollard? To me, it's still Zeke's backfield. The snap counts show it. The carry counts show it. Just Tony Pollard is he's a good NFL player, but as it currently stands, it's not his backfield. And that is not somebody who I'm willing to rely on in my lineups in week 3. If we're taking dart throws during bye weeks and injuries and all that other shit, fine. In week 3, no thank you. But that is actually going to do it for my week 3 preview. Where'd my mouse go? There we go. For my week 3 preview. If you guys enjoyed this video, we did this in 27 minutes, so I love the speed of these things. We just fly. We fly around here to get these things done. So if you enjoyed this, be sure to hit that like button down below. Subscribe so you never miss a video from me. We're going to be introducing 2 videos a week on the channel. One's going to be a tips and tricks, and the other is going to be a weekly preview. I don't love doing recaps, all things considered, because if you're like me, and you probably are at this point, through you either, bought it yourself, you are at your buddy's house watching, or you have other methods, wink wink, of watching. We're all watching Red Zone, and we all know what's going on week in and week out. And so for me to just come in here and recap like what happened game by game, I don't love it. It's just, to me, it feels like a waste of time, to be very honest with you, because we're all watching the same shit. We all know what happened with our own teams. So if anything, maybe I'll come on here like Sunday night or Monday night, depending, and we'll just go through like the big takeaways from the week, like a top 5 takeaways from week 3 type of deal. Other than that, we'll do a tips and tricks video on Tuesday, and then we'll do the weekly previews on either Friday or Saturday. I know this one's getting out a bit late. I apologize for that. Yesterday, just body caught up to me, was a bit drained, and is what it is. We all have those days. So I'll wrap it up here. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, people come and go, but fantasy football championships are forever, and I will see you in the next video.